Hello, I am Kevin Griffin, and I call this Dharma and Recovery, which is actually what Spirit Rock started calling my Buddhism in the 12 Steps class. They wanted something, I don't know what they wanted, but they wanted it, I guess, to be more inclusive. So they thought probably 12 steps made it sound, like only for people with 12 steps, which is good. I appreciate that. Anyway, that's a bit of a rewind. Yes. And we meditate here, and we talk about recovery and Buddhism and whatever else shows up. Sometimes we cover sports, politics, culture, and so culturally speaking, just commenting that it is May 5th, 2023, for those who are watching in the future. You'll be looking at the past, and this is what it was like back then in the May 5th of 2023. And just thinking about how, these holidays get boiled down to something really trivial, like, drinking margaritas or drinking Coronas or something on May 5th, on Cinco de Mayo, which, it's pretty much, I guess every holiday has its alcohol association in one way or another, some more than others. But fortunately, we here at Dharma and Recovery, we don't practice that. We celebrate holidays for their essence. And I don't know. Cinco de Mayo was some kind of a battle. I'm not actually educated in that regard, so forgive me for my ignorance. Or don't forgive me, just resent me for my ignorance. All right, that's enough of my nonsense. Let us meditate. We'll meditate for 20 minutes, and we'll see what happens then. And yes, the after effects of my recent cold are still bubbling up from my lungs into my throat. So hopefully that doesn't interfere with the instruction. Breathing in, breathing out. I was breathing out when I was saying that, so let's try that again. Breathing in and breathing out. And you can close your eyes or just lower your gaze. And feeling your body sitting. With the body at rest. And yet still in motion with the movement of breath. The nervous system. The flow of blood. You can feel all that movement and energy, life. And just feeling those different sensations can be a good way to start your meditation, to just really bring your attention into your body. Feel the reality of this living organism that you inhabit. Times we can also feel almost a sense of moving forward or moving through space when we first come into stillness. If we've been really busy and doing a lot in the course of a day, moving around, we sit down and it seems like we're still going. Seeing if you can release any tension or soften the body, soften the muscles. Even as we hold our upright posture, we let go. Our posture can actually also be reclining if we need to be in that position. And then starting to feel the breath in a more intentional way, bringing attention to the sensations of breathing, the nostrils or the belly. With the nostrils, we feel the air touching as it enters and leaves the body. Or at the belly, we can just feel the movement rising, falling. The great Thai Buddhist master Buddhadasa Bhikkhu calls the breath the body conditioner, by which he means that we can use the breath to calm the body, to condition the state of the body. That the breath can heal or help to heal the body. But the breath is intimately tied in with energetic states. We see this in yoga practices, qigong or tai chi. So simply applying mindfulness to the breath, starting to see how the breath has this healing and calming quality that we can kind of lean into. Not trying to force something to happen, but just kind of on this inclining the mind, inclining the breath. Thich Nhat Hanh gives us the lovely phrases he calls gathas to use with the breath. Deep, slow, calm, ease, smile, release, present moment, wonderful moment. we see that the breath is not simply a neutral or generic meditation object, that it has these functions. These can be used for effects, for calming and healing. The breath can help us to release stress, anxiety, sadness, anger. It all just begins with in and out, in, out. Mindfulness actually does most of this work. All right. Welcome again. Yeah, I think I've been talking about, at least some about, writing about the Anapanasati Sutta, but drawing from several different teachers' books about it. Anapanasati means mindfulness of breathing, so it's a famous sutta in the Pali canon, the early Buddhist teachings, and it's really interesting to see how different teachers sort of talk about this, particularly when you have a Thich Nhat Hanh who's got a very distinctive flavor to his teaching, and how different that is from someone like Buddhadasa, who's Thai, and then you have Venerable Analayo, Bhikkhu Analayo, who is German, and comes at it from this very scholarly approach. And each of them sort of sometimes all their ideas merge, and sometimes they really diverged in significant ways. But this term that I mentioned from Buddhadasa, the Kaya Sankhara, body conditioner, it's an interesting way to think about the breath and how we use it. When we use it intentionally, like, we're using the breath to calm down. Because sometimes it can feel as if, it's going the other way, that the breath is being conditioned by the mind, which it is at times, so it's a two-way street, but this idea of using the breath intentionally as a kind of healing and energy balancing power. It's interesting, and to see that because usually the way mindfulness of breathing is taught in the kind of Western Buddhist world, it is, as I said, it's kind of just a neutral or a generic thing. Just, the breath, it's just something to use, just a convenient thing to pay attention to. But anapana, the word pana, is the same word as the Sanskrit word prana, which, in yoga, you have pranayama breathing, right? Or pranayama yoga. Anyway, it's, associated with the breath. And, I'm sure many of you have, encountered yoga teachings where you do very intentional types of breathing, like, you count a certain number of, seconds on the in breath and count a certain amount on the out breath, or they have the fire breath where and in different ways, right? So that's pranayama. I mean, that's, Kevin's simplistic version of pranayama, that we do intentional things with the breath. So the suggestion particularly from Buddhadasa and from Thich Nhat Hanh, is that this is part of what the Buddha was teaching. So that when he was teaching mindfulness of breath, it wasn't just, you can pay attention to the breath, or you can pay attention to, noise, or you can pay attention to, a candle. It was like a very specific thing, because he was interested in using the breath as a healing tool. And we see there are some other suttas where there's one that I can think of where one of the monks is ill, and the Buddha tells Ananda, his attendant, to go and visit that monk and teach him anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing, and that through that practice, the monk gets well. So clearly, we're being given the message that this practice, the mindfulness of breathing, is more than just a mindfulness. It's not more than just a mental exercise. In other words, it has physical implications. So just something I've been, thinking about. trying to use the breath more intentionally in my own daily life, which is kind of funny to me, after 40 some years of practicing. It's like, oh, now I think I'll try to be more mindful of my breath. Like, weren't you doing that before? And really, when I read, particularly Thich Nhat Hanh, who, really embraces that, I realize, well, yeah, no, I haven't. Not like that. Not like try to bring it in whenever you can throughout the day. Anytime you can, just notice your breath. The first instruction in the sutta is to be aware of the long breath and aware of the short breath. So just to be aware of the length of the breath. And I find that was something that when I first was studying the sutta, I thought, well, that's not really like part of my practice. When I'm meditating, I'm paying attention to the sensation of the breath, not the length of it. But I've noticed that, excuse me, I put a cough drop in. I've noticed that if I'm trying to be mindful of my breath during the day, that's actually a really good thing to just notice. Oh, I'm taking a deep breath, and then just notice, oh, that's a longer breath. Or, oh, my breath has really shortened, so that in that case, you're not paying attention to the sensation of the breath, which takes a little bit more focus, to feel it, but just to notice, oh, right, I just took a long breath there. That was, and those, because especially long breaths tend to stand out, right? They tend to be like, oh, wow, I'm really catching my breath here. It becomes a really useful daily mindfulness practice to just notice the length of your breath. So that's my free talk. I'm going to read from my workbook a little bit. So last Friday night, I read from the preface, and so now I'm on the introduction. This is page 15. What does it mean to, quote, work the steps, unquote? The phrase is tossed around at meetings and between people in recovery as though everyone knows what it means. But working the steps isn't like building a house or learning to drive. There are no blueprints or rules of the road. Okay, that's not true. People have written blueprints, but I'm not convinced that any of them are the definitive way to work the steps. For a lot of people, the phrase probably means something like going through one of those workbooks that give you loads of questions to answer about every step. You go through it, fill out the blank pages, and poof, you're cured. Not so fast. I can't say a lot about these kinds of books since I've never worked one. When I start to read the questions, I get annoyed or bored. The thing is, I didn't get a sponsor till I was already a year clean and sober. And one of the first things he said to me was, if you made it through a year, you must have worked the first 3 steps. So let's start on step 4, which means I never worked steps 1 to 3 with a sponsor. I know a lot of people write their step 1, reviewing all the behaviors and consequences of their addiction. Although I didn't do that in a written way, I did reflect on it repeatedly. This reflection convinced me that I could never go back to drinking and using because it simply didn't work. Maybe I should have said they didn't work. I'd tried for years to control and enjoy drugs and alcohol, and I couldn't. Step 1 helped me to finally see and accept this once and for all. Done. Steps 2 and 3 were more internal and ongoing. Step 3 still is. I formally did steps 4 through 9 with my sponsor, writing the inventory, reading it to him, doing the prayers in the AA Big Book, making the list, and making amends. That's the closest I've come to officially working the steps. But I by no means believe that going through those 6 steps once was all I needed to do with them. What I learned in that process and adopted as a way of living in? Oh, that's weird. As a way of living in. So there it is. I got to finish the sentence before I understand my syntax. What I learned in that process and adopted as a way of living in and viewing the world has informed my life ever since. Yes, I went through a process that could be called working the steps, at least some of them, but I don't believe that this one-time effort in any way fulfilled my recovery work. For me, the term doesn't really fit the process. I think it's more important to live the steps than to work them. We have to integrate the values and principles of the steps into our lives if they are to mean anything beyond detox and getting sober for a little while. Living the steps has wide-ranging implications, touching every part of our lives. But for me, the starting point is always inside, and that's why meditation is the cornerstone of my program. Today, rather than writing the steps, I use meditation as the tool for working the steps. Let me give you an idea of how that works. When I sit down to meditate, I come face to face with my lack of control over my body and mind, thus seeing that I am powerless. Step one. I meditate because I believe that the benefits derived from this work, those qualities that are developed and the insights that are revealed, can bring harmony and clarity to my life. Step two. When I meditate, I turn myself over to a process that is beyond my control. I don't control the results of my practice, but I do invariably benefit from it. Step three. During meditation, all my stuff comes up. You could call this step 10 rather than step 4 because it's more concerned with what's happening right now than my history. But in any case, meditation reveals my inventory. Since step 5 involves another person, I can't fully... that's interesting, period. There was no editor for this book, by the way, it was me. Since step 5 involves another person, I can't fully do it alone, so this is one step I can't do in solitary meditation. Nonetheless, the admitted to God and to ourselves parts are done in meditation. Meditation is the groundwork for letting go. Step 6. In meditation, I let go. Step 7. In meditation, those I've harmed appear in my mind, especially in formal loving kindness practice. Step 8. Although I can't make amends to others in a traditional way through meditation, I can offer them love and compassion. But the more significant way I relate step 9 to meditation is as an amends to myself, a healing practice. Step 10, see step 4. Step 11 is the place where we're encouraged to meditate, so the connection is direct. Through the process of meditation and Buddhist practice, just as with the steps, there are insights and openings that can be called spiritual awakening. Step 12. In fact, I think it's difficult to have a transformative awakening without some form of meditative or contemplative work. That's it. Ends kind of suddenly. So that's the introduction. And I would say that it, it's kind of, I'm kind of laying down my, I don't know, putting my cards on the table, kind of just making it pretty clear where I'm coming from there. So, I'm sure there are some people who pick that up and read that and go, well, this isn't for me, because, but I think it's always, going back to this first question, working the steps, it's one that as I say, I've heard many people say it, and I'm often curious what it means to them. And it does often seem to involve something about writing. And I'm skeptical of that. I mean, I'm not skeptical of it, that it doesn't work. I put it another way. It's not what works for me. And I think it's interesting because, I'm a writer, which just mean, I write stuff, and I do that a lot. And, it's part of my career, and it's my kind of self-expression. And it's got a lot of roles in my life, writing, but it's not really where I want to do my spiritual work, like do my spiritual processing. And so it's one of the ways that I kind of feel like an outsider in the recovery world, like, oh, you should write about it. And I'm like, yeah, you know. So I'm not, I don't at all mean to belittle that or suggest that's not a good process. It's just not what I do. But on a positive note, I'll say that, my hope is that what I'm suggesting to people is this approach that's valuable, whether you write about things or not, right? Whether your idea of working the steps is writing about them or not, that there's this internal process that has to happen, because just putting it down on paper doesn't mean that anything internal has happened. It could be just you're projecting out from your head. It can be just from your head to the paper without sort of bypassing the heart, shall we say. And I also, obviously, and you guys probably know this already, that more importantly, I think there's something that happens when we explore meditation deeply that has a really transformative impact that other elements of recovery programs don't have. And that doesn't mean they aren't important, because obviously fellowship, understanding the steps, working with others, inventory work, all of this is valuable and important. But to me, what we can get out of this deep dive into the heart mind and into this inner exploration kind of enriches and deepens and sort of, it permeates all of it then, and gives something that we can't get otherwise. And one of the things that it gets is something that's often touted in recovery, which is serenity. And a serious meditation practice brings a level of serenity that's beyond any kind of like, oh, I feel serene because I don't drink anymore. It's, many of us, many of you, I know, have had meditative experiences that were deep and profound and meaningful. And those things really enrich our lives and our recovery in ways that I don't think working the steps, so-called, can do. And I don't know, I guess all this is sort of sounding like a critique. And I think of what I do not so much as, I think, again, this is something somewhat obvious, but it's something I often say. I don't suggest, do Kevin Griffin's workbook as a substitute for a recovery program, but as something to really partner with a traditional recovery program. I think it really can deepen and enrich it. So, and finally, I'll say, I think this finally, who knows, that this brief little synopsis of the way I view working the step through meditation is really just some of the things, the things that came to mind as I was writing this, that really, I think there are other ways, particularly step 1, step 3, turning it over and powerlessness, and spiritual awakening, and step 7, removing our shortcomings. All of those things have different like dimensions and levels that can happen through meditation that I'm not really going into explicitly here. So there's a little, drop in your little Friday night Dharma and recovery bucket. Hopefully something that is of some value. So I'll just see if anybody wants to chime in, say something. Do, do, do. La, 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 la. Oh, look at all the things that, oh, you know what, I'll tell you, in case anybody's in the Bay Area, on Sunday, I am going to be at a yoga center in Walnut Creek, of all places, a place called Indigo Yoga. And if you click on that link in the chat, you can see it, 2 o'clock to 3:30. I don't know, they're just random people who invited me to come. And so, of course, I said hello. I mean, I said, yes. I probably said hello as well. But anyway, I don't know, the brain isn't fully functional, but, so it'd be great if somebody came out, anybody. I don't know if anybody's going to come. I'm going to Alaska in 2 weeks, so somebody's going to have to sub for me on whatever it is, the 20th, I think, or 19th or something. What other news is there in the Kevin land? That's about it. I'm just killing time.
Angela.
Somebody say something. Angela, say something.
Hi.
Hi. Long time no see.
Right.
Oh, here's the Reverend Freechild. Oh, wait a minute. I think my daughter just landed. Let me see. Yep, she just landed. How long does it take to get to the airport from Berkeley right now? Go ahead.
Just quickly, I appreciate, hearing your thoughts on your workbook, and it'll be cool to, go through that with you. About the breathing, I've thought about this before. I'm a big sigher. I sigh a lot for many years, and it's when I'm, overwhelmed.
Yep.
And people have commented on it. So I've thought about replacing the sigh with, I know it's helpful, like my body, it just happens automatically. I don't even notice it sometimes.
Right.
But I have been noticing, the more I'm overwhelmed, I have been noticing it. So it's interesting because I'm like, I can bring more mindfulness to it, and it would probably be more effective actually for like calming me down, because if I'm doing it unconsciously, and it kind of becomes like another thing that it doesn't help to really get me out of the overwhelm, if that makes sense. And so your comment about, the length and just noticing the breath more, like, I think that's a great, way that I can bring more mindfulness to it, because it's not necessarily as helpful, I think, as it could be, if that makes sense.
Right. So use the sigh when it catches your attention as a mindfulness bell to then more intentionally take some breaths.
Right.
Because the sigh is, as you are suggesting, an indication that there's some stress going on, or some feeling, some emotion is being expressed audibly. And so using the body conditioner, the Kaya Sankara, and just very intentionally breathing, then yeah, it can then you can use that, as I say, use it as a mindfulness bell.
Yeah, I like that. That, yeah, once that happens, then like, oh yeah, okay.
And as you're breathing intentionally, noticing what the feeling was, or acknowledging to yourself what it was that triggered the sigh. What was the thought? What was the feeling that came up that like, oh yeah, I didn't even notice that. Like, it is like a mindfulness bell to me. It's like, oh, something's going on. and you're not paying attention. So your body kind of tries to get your attention, by doing this sort of audible thing. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, I'm going to go.
Okay.
But I will leave you all here now you can talk behind my back. So I'll leave the group with Angela, and you guys can share, which you never do. I mean, rarely. So all right. Thank you. And I'll be back on Tuesday.